Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm honored to be the chair of the sub-session on Voices from the Field, how water interventions changes food, nutrition, and health for vulnerable people. First, I want to thank the conveners, Food and Agriculture Organization, Development Bank of Latin America, Catholic Relief Services, Michigan State University, European Union, and the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. As we all know, climate change is putting disproportionate stress on poor and vulnerable populations who do not have adequate access to sanitation and water services. Currently, it is estimated that over 2 billion people are affected by moderate and severe hunger and malnutrition globally, and 4.2 million still lack sanitation facilities. With the onset of COVID and also the climate change issues that we are actually facing, our target to achieve SDG 6 in 2030, it's a challenge. Food security and nutrition are negatively impacted by climate change and increasing water variability, both in agriculture, livelihood, and safe water for human consumption. Building and improving economic and social and environmental resilience is one of the ways for us to be able to improve the well-being of people, especially the most vulnerable. And by doing this, we need to focus on local solutions and being strategic in terms of our interventions that will connect water supply, food, nutrition, and health all together. In this session, we are going to hear from beneficiaries, more importantly, the vulnerable, from Bolivia to Ethiopia, Senegal to El Salvador. And then after that, we'll have a panel discussion on key issues that relate to connecting water source protection, agriculture, food production, livelihood, and water for human consumption. So at this stage, I'll run you through the agenda. First, we'll have the video from CRS that tells us how beneficiaries in El Salvador and Ethiopia are taking local actions to make them more resilient, and as well as also make them more sustainable to be able to address shocks and stresses that would come, they would affect in the future. So the first video, please, all of us should have a look.
In 2008, CRS and its partners began construction on a water supply system that carries water from a highland spring to various points across East Hararghe, Ethiopia. These water points have transformed the lives of women and their families who live in the small rural communities of Ethiopia.
Jiraataas jiru fila bishaan jireenya namaati. Dhiqachuu, miicachuu, indagana nyaataan itti bilcheeffachuu, hawaasa keenyaan fayyaduu kana bira kutee immoo.
In Africa, women like Hawa bear the burden of collecting water, up to 20 liters once or twice a day. It is tiring, time-consuming, and often dangerous work.
Haala jiru jireenyi isaa fagoodha gaazexaa asii deemnee barbaanna ganama yoo deemnee galgala galla.
During their treks to get water, women and their children are vulnerable to assaults by both humans and wild animals. And because they were responsible for fetching water, girls could not attend school. Collecting water became the main focus of the day. All of this changed with the construction of the water point.
Jireenya keenya jijjiirame bishaan sana yeroo deemnee silaa bishaan barbaada yeroo gubne sana amma yeroo san mana jirra jechuudha. Kanaaf daa'ima keenya yeroodhaan irraa dhiineeti yeroo nyaata goonee fi karaa mana barumsaa ergina. Yeroo fi harkadhe sanis ittiin fayyadameeti waan kanarraa oomishachuu danda'e. Kanaafuu daganaa isa kan waamee qaanii jedhe gaafa mana keessaa yoo gaa inni mana keessa tolche gaa beekamu himamuu danda'ama.
Abbabech Gizawu jedheen bar. Maqaan koo Abbabech Gizawu, umuriin koo 40. Gandi huni magaalaa Cobii jedhama fa.
Ethiopia is the second populous country in Africa, over 100 million now. 25% of the population are not accessing adequate water.
Bishaanichi lagaa dhufuu fi burqaa irraa dhufu sun qulqullina hin qabu. Sababa kanaaf garaa kaasaan daa'imman haadholiin hin miidhamu dhukkuba adda addaatiif saaxilamu. Silaa akkuma isin jedhe sana buufanni fayyaa keenya.
Akkuma dubbataa jirtan hoggaa ilaalan kana fakkaata. Biyyeedha jechuudha. Yoo xiqqaate hoggaa himuuf udaan namaatti firii qaban. Wanti immoo loksaa jiru. Udaan namaatti fi udaan horii udaan harrootatti kan namaatti tures.
Bishaan nuuf fooyya'aa nuuf eessittiin nutis akkasumatti fooyyofna daarri keenya seeraan migibiin keenya seeraan qaamni keenya seeraan eegameet bishaan ganama sama galgalaas akka garaatti argannee itti fayyadamnee akka garaa keenyatti jireenya keenyatti fooyyessina hinna kanti.
For years, CRS has been providing shallow wells or catchments or boreholes. We really want to provide that the larger system. I mean, like we do back home, where we have big systems that provide water to thousands and thousands of people. We've procured and provided to our local church partners water drilling rigs that we can access at any time, and they can bring it to these areas and go up to 500 meters or more deep to access the water. It's really easy for us to do it.
They put partnership at first priority, and whenever the partners have any kind of question, they are there to respond and to support as well.
CRS is successful because we have technical staff, we have partners who are able to reach all areas of the country, and we have the equipment necessary to put in very deep water systems.
Our second video shows the work the Development Bank of Latin America is doing in Bolivia to improve the provision of water and food security in the country. Next video for us to watch.
Bolivia, país sudamericano con una población cercana a los 12 millones de habitantes, de los cuales 3,5 millones se encuentran en zonas rurales. Su territorio de más de 1 millón de kilómetros de extensión está compuesto por 3 regiones geográficas: altiplanos, valles y llanos. Desde 2011, CAF, Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, viene apoyando al sector de agua potable y riego en Bolivia mediante los programas Mi Agua y Mi Riego, dado que en dicho año el área rural presentaba bajos niveles de cobertura. Apenas el 59% de la población rural contaba con servicio de agua potable. En un entorno donde la pobreza rural bordeaba el 62%, y la pobreza extrema el 42%. Es decir que 3 de cada 5 pobladores rurales vivía en condiciones de pobreza. La población rural boliviana se dedica fundamentalmente a actividades agrícolas, con un alto porcentaje dedicado a la agricultura familiar, situación en la que una familia posee entre 1 a 2 hectáreas y cuya producción se destina de manera importante al autoconsumo. En la última década, mediante 3.400 proyectos en todo el territorio boliviano, los programas Mi Agua y Mi Riego han beneficiado a la población con 130.000 nuevas conexiones de agua potable y beneficiarán con 72.000 hectáreas de riego, además de 105.000 conexiones rehabilitadas, 11.000 nuevas conexiones de saneamiento y 10.500 grifos públicos para mejorar la calidad de vida de 2,25 millones de personas.
Y estoy muy contento de haber tenido a la alcantarilla de ese anhelo de mucho tiempo ya. Y ahora tenemos y funciona muy bien y estamos muy contentos de haber tenido ese.
Para nosotros este proyecto es muy grande para poder mejorar nuestro ganado, poder mejorar nuestros forrajes y tener una mejor vida, ¿no?
Y agua es vida. En este lugar, en este altiplano, vamos a hacer dar nosotros productos de hortaliza y también para nuestros ganados.
Ya están conformes, contentos, porque ya tienen agua, ya tiene cada uno en su propia casa.
Feliz pues, feliz. Ya no voy a sufrir así. Cualquier rato me voy a lavar ropa, cualquier rato me voy a lavar mis cosas. Para cocinar, para lavar, me voy a bañar, a mis hijos les voy a bañar.
Desde 2011 hasta 2020, CAF ha contribuido en la evolución de la cobertura de agua potable en la zona rural del país, de un 59% a un 69%. Cifras que se traducen en beneficio directo para millones de bolivianos.
Our third video and last for this session, it's the World Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is doing in Senegal to empower women through the provision of water supply. Third video for us to watch. Okay, there we go. Thanks.
ndaxte mar lañ àndaloon fi bu dégg bëcc doo tala sang doo tala foofu même lekk bi sax forcé la ndaxte léegi boo xëyatee nga dem root juróom-ñetti kilomètre wala ngay ñëw tisbaar jot boo amee tuuti fom bidon yii nga jël ci nga toggee añ bu ñu lekkee pare aha demaat nañ takk sareet juróomi bari ki indi am ci beneen bidon fette ko taxaw ƴett
bi école lañ doon sonn booba mbéy nawee rek lañ xam buñ doon def suñ rende yi suñ añ yi dañ doon sonn
1 million assistance for the Sahel is focused on women because generally in Africa, in the Sahel, it's women that have the burden to go and fetch water. Very often they do more than 10 kilometers to find water and 10 kilometers to come back home with their children. And when they do so, their children don't go to school because they have to help their mothers. For Senegal, we have just launched the project officially with the government. Our plan is in the next 3 years to support 10,000 women to get access to water through the cisterns.
am na lu bari luñ ci jàng tabax ndaal be ak seng yeeg dagg bant yeeg yépp dañ leen jàngal.
Et pour le maraîchage organique, nous faisons bon nombre d'activités pour renforcer les femmes, pour au moins permettre aux femmes d'avoir des outils pour bien gérer leurs revenus et bien gérer aussi leur organisation.
léegi comme am nañ li ñuy def ci ceeb bi ñu sant yàlla bu baax a baax tamaar bi pam bi ak batasi bi ak salade bi yépp moo baax sama demee sama jàng bi mbaa bi pour sekkat yi ñu duñu sàmm ñu ngi ñëwaat ñu ngi rooti ñu ngi ñëwaat
xaalis bi may jël ci lujum bi dinaa ko jëfandikoo ndax bu fekkee ne maa ngi man am naa xale yuy jàng bu ñu amee problème ci xaalis boobu laay jëfandikoo.
These 3 videos show us how vulnerable people in communities are taking small steps to design local solutions that are able to provide them their livelihood as well as their health, improve their health and nutrition status. The smile on their faces tells us everything about what they get from the provision of water supply. And this is a clear demonstration of how water is life and also how water changes life. In the next part of this session, we are going to have a panel discussion with 3 eminent people. Claudia Ringler, the Deputy Director of Production and Technology Division, International Food Policy and Research Institute. So Vero, Project Officer, Water Sanitation Infrastructure and Energy, European Commission. And Christine Segovia, Director of Irrigation of the Environment and Water Ministry of Bolivia. So you're all welcome to this panel discussion. And as the chair of this session, David Cheche, CRS, I'm going to moderate the discussions as we move along. If you can kindly, kindly introduce yourself in 1 minute to the panel, to the audience, that would be great. So I start with Ho.
Hello, my name is Jorge Salguero, and I work for the European Commission, and I am program manager of especially the water and sanitation sector. And right now I'm working in Bolivia. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Christine, please. Christine, can you introduce yourself briefly?
¿Podría presentarse, por favor?
Bueno, primeramente
Perdón. Primeramente, muy buenas tardes a todos los presentes. Agradecerles por la invitación. Mi nombre es Cristian Segovia. Soy el director general de riego del Ministerio de Medio Ambiente y Agua, perteneciente del Viceministerio de Recursos Hídricos y Riego, perteneciente al Ministerio de Medio Ambiente, ingeniero civil de profesión, máster en diseño y construcción de obras hidráulicas, con 2 especialidades, una en riego tecnificado e hidrología, y especialidad en empresas, ¿no? Muy grato este evento con la finalidad de compartir experiencias entre los participantes y bueno, dispuestos a absorber cualquier duda que se tenga en torno a lo que es la política de riego de nuestro Estado plurinacional de Bolivia, bajo los lineamientos que tenemos de nuestro hermano presidente y de nuestro Gilata Bichoquehuanca.
Okay, thank you so much, Claudia.
Yeah, hello. Thanks to invite me to this really exciting sessions, hearing voices from the ground. How can we accelerate water, food security and wash outcomes through directed programs that alleviate also women's constraints? So I work on water for food security mostly, but obviously we are interested in nutrition. And so the wash side, also providing water for domestic purposes is very important. I'm part of the CJR, the world's largest agricultural research system, but as our goals are really moving beyond production also to nutrition and health. So we are interested in water for both productive and reproductive uses. And it's really great to have seen already all these voices from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you all for the short introduction, and good to have you on this panel. My first question goes to Christine. What is the general approach to water priorities in Bolivia with regards to food security? If you can throw a bit more light on what the approach is in Bolivia with regards to water and food security for us to listen to.
Bueno, es importante, ¿no? Ese relacionamiento que existe entre lo que es el líquido elemento, el agua, con el tema de la producción. Y como decía la compañera presente, pasar de la producción es ir ya también hacia lo que es la nutrición. Y hablando de nutrición, ya estamos enfocados a lo que es la seguridad alimentaria. Nosotros como enfoque que se generó a través de nuestro hermano ministro y nuestro hermano viceministro, se basa en 3 pilares, ¿no? El primer pilar, que es la ampliación de la frontera agrícola, pero una ampliación planificada, con una diversificación de cultivos de acuerdo a los potenciales de cada zona, con la finalidad de obtener éxito ahora en los lugares donde podamos intervenir. El siguiente pilar que tenemos es incrementar la productividad. ¿Cómo podemos incrementar la productividad desde la perspectiva del uso del agua? Mejorando las eficiencias en la aplicación del uso del agua, ¿no? Ya que eso me va a coadyuvar a que los rendimientos productivos de los cultivos en los cuales se puede intervenir tiendan a mejorar, ¿ya? Es muy importante la aplicación de riegos de alta frecuencia, llámese goteo, microaspersión, aspersión, entre otros, con la finalidad de ir haciendo usos eficientes del agua. Considerando, ¿no?, que cada vez estamos teniendo periodos de lluvia aquí, en el caso particular de Bolivia, y está ocurriendo en varias partes del mundo, ¿no?, donde se tienen concentraciones de lluvia cada vez más marcadas, ¿no? Otro pilar que estamos manejando dentro de lo que es el ministerio y el viceministerio es la parte del fortalecimiento productivo a los actores involucrados. Es muy importante que podamos empoderar a lo que son los agricultores, a estas nuevas tecnologías de riego y a una conciencia de esa aplicación de esa tecnología de riego, con la finalidad de que se puedan empoderar del proyecto y este proyecto pueda ser exitoso y sustentable en el tiempo, ¿no? Ese más o menos es el lineamiento que tenemos y el enfoque que tenemos como Estado plurinacional, en lo cual estamos pensando intervenir. Si bien hasta el momento hemos logrado buenas intervenciones en lo que es el tema del incremento de nuestra frontera agrícola, pero creo que ahora ya estamos pensando un poco más allá del incremento en hectáreas físicas, sino en incrementar la productividad y la sostenibilidad de todos los sistemas de riego que podamos intervenir.
Thank you very much for that. I just have one follow-up question. Can you tell us the most important partner of the Bolivian public sector, and also how you try as much as possible to address the needs of the most vulnerable?
Bueno, hablar de un solo socio creo que es limitar mucho, ¿no? Tenemos más bien apoyos muy importantes desde la parte incluso de financiadores, como en este caso CAP, BIP, entre otros, ¿no? Aportes y apoyos multisectoriales que nos vienen coadyuvando en poder encarar estas políticas, en poder encarar estos proyectos con la finalidad, ¿no? de lograr los objetivos. Es muy importante resaltar, ¿no? de que se está haciendo un trabajo coordinado con otros entes desconcentrados dentro de lo que es el Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, con la finalidad de llegar directamente a los productores. En función a eso, con los apoyos de los SENARIs, de los CEDERIs, de las entidades autónomas desconcentradas, se pudo establecer, ¿no? una planificación de intervención de aquí en adelante, ¿no? Esto es muy importante porque podemos llegar directamente a esa zona vulnerable y entender las necesidades. Un gran lineamiento que se generó es de que nuestras autoridades, tanto nuestro hermano ministro como nuestro hermano viceministro, si bien tienen la capacitación académica respectiva, pero tienen un conocimiento a veces que no se da en la academia, que es el conocimiento de campo, ¿no? Ya que ellos tienen la vivencia de lo que ocurre en lo que es la parte productiva y lo que es estar en contacto directo, ¿no? con esa población vulnerable. De igual manera, el equipo técnico que se conformó dentro del viceministerio y del ministerio está con esa estructura, ¿no? De que somos personas que hemos trabajado, hemos estado en contacto con las zonas vulnerables y estamos tratando de absorber todos esos conocimientos para plasmarlos en políticas, programas y proyectos que puedan coadyuvar a solucionar la problemática, ¿no?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insight. I will now move to Claudia for a question. Claudia, it's often said that academic is far from the field, and in terms of the reality or the realities on the ground. Can you tell us how you try as much as possible, based on the work you do in research and generating new knowledge, how that helps to address water-related issues of the most vulnerable in society?
Yeah, David, I think, yeah, you've definitely hit a very important point. So, coming from a research perspective, we obviously always focus on getting some research publications out, but those might not be very relevant for implementers on the ground like CRS, or even for Christian in Bolivia. So because you're looking for very practical tools and solutions, and I think one way that we have been trying to address this as CJR is that we're doing a lot of online capacity building modules that are short, that are tailored to specific regions, and that can really move the needle forward on some of these important areas that I think we have, that we have seen here, like the role of women as key stewards of water, as those, who are most time constrained. Or what are these linkages between productive and reproductive uses of water? Again, the example I think from Senegal has been excellent, showing that water is being used both for domestic purposes by women, but then also to support small kitchen gardens. So I think our focus has been to develop very praxis relevant tools and guidelines, for example, how to strengthen nutrition, sensitivity of irrigation, how to empower women through irrigation, how to combine wash and nutrition and productivity, agricultural productivity outcomes. And also, I guess one way we are doing that is actually by directly working with some of the investors and implementers on the ground. For example, Self-Employed Women's Association in South Asia or Groots Kenya. So they have their own agriculture programs and they're actually looking for evidence on exactly those questions. So I think we're trying to produce some evidence, ideally with implementers. And yeah, but I agree, there's still a bit of a disconnect in that as a researcher, our main goal is to produce global public goods and to publish. And at the same time, we would like to support action on the ground. And in fact, we are looking, to policymakers and investors to hear what are the specific research questions that they would like to see answered. And I think those questions are probably multiplying because we have COVID-19. We know that lack of access to wash, has made it very difficult to fight the disease. When you don't, you have to travel 10 kilometers to collect water, but you're actually not allowed because of a lockdown or other mobility constraints. At the same time, with climate change, I think research questions are also multiplying. So how can we increase productivity in agriculture through water while still meeting all of this growing domestic water use goals? So I think their questions are there. I think we might probably need more dialogues. And again, I think work as closely as possible with policymakers and implementers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for that. Claudia, just to build on that, the nexus between water and food, it's much talked about and researched. I was just wondering what your insight and your experience is in that work that will help drive down cost for the most vulnerable in terms of their livelihood.
So in terms of the linkages, I mean, recent research that we did in Ethiopia, just as an example, did find that if you have groundwater supported small-scale irrigation close to your homestead, that those households face little to no challenges in accessing domestic water. So I think that there we can definitely support two goals at the same time. And of course, those households with groundwater irrigation close to the homestead, also women obviously use less time to collect water. So those are some important positive outcomes. But when irrigators, for example, use a surface water source to irrigate, the outcomes for wash behavior is actually worse, right? And the quality of that water is obviously not acceptable usually for drinking and domestic purposes. So having access to water for productive uses such as irrigation does not mean that your access for domestic purposes is better. And I think the other interesting insight that we have found is that you might have irrigation and you might have enough domestic water, but that doesn't mean that you have a hand washing station with soap available at the homestead. So one thing is the tools and the access to water, but at the same time, you also need capacity building, behavioral change communication to actually help ensure that the actual outcomes and the goals that we would like to achieve, such as improved nutrition and improved health, are actually, are moved into the action space or into that last mile. So we often need more than access to water. And more than access to water for both productive and domestic uses, we also need additional capacity and additional interventions to achieve nutrition and health outcomes. I think those are some important insights. So again, coming just from the irrigation side, or even just building some sanitation and so forth facilities alone might not be enough. You actually do need to change mental models of households to achieve the desired outcomes. And I guess one other type of technology or intervention that is considered now more frequently are the so-called multiple use systems. And I think the MIAGWA program is supporting those as well, where you, from the beginning, once you develop a domestic water use system, you consider how water can also be used productively. And when you build a irrigation system, you consider how you can also still use that water for domestic purposes. So I think that is really great. saves resources is important, especially after COVID and with climate change. But what is really needed is also to support capacity of women and families in terms of then using the correct sanitary behavior, having soap and a specific hand washing station available in the household. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, for raising all those important points and also to echo the system-related approach to dealing with some of these challenges that we're actually facing. And yeah, that's one thing that we have to look at because resources are limited. So now I'll turn to our colleague Jo from the European Union or European Commission. With regards to water sources and then the provision of water, there has been some delay in this mismatch in terms of the service provision and the source protection. Can you tell us how the EC is, the steps that you are taking to connect water source protection and water supply as part of your prioritization exercise?
Yes, of course. Thank you, David. Well, as Christian Segovia, the director of irrigation, has explained, it's clear that the increasing frequency and severity of droughts present a major threat to the right to food, and that water shortage are particularly problematic for small-scale farmers who don't have access to water for irrigation. While progress has been made for most of the Agenda 2030 targets, the world is currently not on track to meet the SDG 6. Access to water and sanitation is a human right, yet billions of people worldwide are still facing daily challenges accessing the most basic of services. And food insecurity continues to rise, as well as to sustain ecosystem. Human rights are at the heart of European Union's external action, and the EU considers water as an indispensable resource for all economic activities, and is of course closely linked with energy needs and food security, as well as to sustain all the services they provide. In this sense, the European Union uses a partnership approach to support developing countries in the transition to sustainable food system by fostering international research for sustainable value change, reducing malnutrition, and providing guidance for sustainable farming systems and improved livelihood. Besides, the European Union stresses in all their interventions now that the significant contribution of the circular economy to water savings, including their use, underlines the role of digital, technology-based, and other innovative solutions. Finally, it's important to mention too that the European Union is providing a critical collaboration and contribution to the implementation of the global network against food crisis too. This network is a joint facility that draws the world attention to the devastating effects of climate change, conflicts, and socioeconomic crisis on food security. It's a key initiative for better coordination, prevention, and proactive interventions in areas facing recurrent food crisis.
Thank you very much for that. I was just wondering whether in the midst of COVID now, has the priorities of the EC changed with regards to the current COVID pandemic?
Well, in the years to come, and particularly now in this COVID-19 pandemic recovery, the European Union will continue to work around common priorities to address current and emerging global challenges. Placing great importance on climate change, mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity and natural resources protection, sustainable food systems and food security, as well as digitalization with a strong focus on the European Green Deal initiative and its key initiatives such as the farm to fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy, and the circular economy action plan. In line with the Green Deal initiative, the European Union is now looking into a recovery that is green, sustainable, fair, and inclusive. EU will play a key role in delivering the 2030 agenda and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Likewise, European Union will continue to strive for youth and women employment, entrepreneurship and development in agriculture and agribusiness, strengthen social protection, and invest in rural poverty in order to reduce that poverty across the globe.
Thank you. For my last question, which is something that the sector has been struggling with, it's the connection between source protection and water supply. Most partners working to address SDG 6 find it challenging to connect water source protection to water supply. I was just wondering if you can share with us your current approach to ensuring that there is some form of connection between all the SDG 6 targets, source protection, all the way to management.
Well, regarding how we prioritize actions to reach the most vulnerable, I think that for us, we promote and protect that the human right to safe drinking water and sanitation, and in our interventions in this field have an inclusive approach and emphasize the principle of non-discrimination and leaving no one behind. Gender equality is mainstream in all European Union intervention, and particular attention is given to the needs of women and girls and the most vulnerable people. In this regard, EU remains committed to systematically using in all our interventions gender analysis, gender mainstreaming, sex disaggregated data, and gender sensitive indicators in all the phases: identification, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation processes throughout all our European Union external action. And what we usually do in this sense is that we believe that the participation by representatives of all concerned, including the most vulnerable, is key to ensure that all the water and sanitation answers the actual needs of communities.
Thank you very much for that experience and that way forward with regards to connecting water source protection and water supply. And thanks, Claudia, also Christian, for giving us some insight into the work that you do in your respective agencies and place of work. I open the floor now for questions for participants. If you have any question you want to share with the panel members, please write it in the text box. We have like 5 minutes for any other extra questions. And after that, I'll wrap up the session with the key takeaways.
Thank you, Chair David. I would just like to say we don't have any comments or questions, but we do have an audience here of about 30 to 40 people in the session. So clearly our panel is very good in responding to our questions. I just wonder if we can invite the panelists to mention something specific about youth, because I don't think we have talked very much about the youth. We talked about the gender and the equality, but if you have some specific, what could be the issues to engage youth in better food security, coupled with the water interventions and solutions that we try to bring about for the most vulnerable. So please, a few minutes and very short. Maybe Christian, you want to start, please?
Sí, creo que esa pregunta se realizamos nosotros al momento de asumir las funciones, ¿no? Porque es muy importante, ¿no? Llegar a la población joven para que pueda concientizarse sobre la problemática. Incluso más aún en el tema de la agricultura, estamos denotando de que el promedio de edad, ¿no ve?, para dedicarse a esa actividad ya como un medio de sustento de vida se está viendo cada vez más prolongado, ¿ya? Por tal razón nosotros dentro de los nuevos programas que pensamos encarar o de los programas que estamos armando, estamos enfocados en el fortalecimiento y en la formación de líderes productivos. O sea, porque pensamos que a partir de ahí, de esos líderes productivos, podemos ya inculcar lo que son nuevas prácticas. Y es muy importante trabajar con esos líderes productivos. ¿Por qué? Porque son de carácter retroalimentario, ya que nosotros podemos entrar con una instrucción sobre la tecnología de riego, pero ellos tienen conocimientos que vienen arrastrando o que vienen acumulando por parte de sus abuelos, de sus tíos, de sus padres, que son muy importantes, ¿no? Para saltar de ese punto que habló la compañera en su anterior intervención, ¿no? Saltar de la academia a la aplicación en el terreno, ¿no? Es nuestro enfoque en función a que esos líderes productivos también van a fungir como líderes dentro de sus comunidades y van a poder establecer esa concientización a los demás. Creo que si nosotros llegamos a formar de buena manera estos líderes, vamos a garantizar la sostenibilidad de estos proyectos, y al garantizar la sostenibilidad de estos proyectos, estamos garantizando la producción. Al garantizar la producción, estamos garantizando la diversificación de la alimentación y por ende estamos garantizando la seguridad alimentaria y la nutrición. Ese es el enfoque que estamos planteando ahora y que queremos encarar con mucha iniciativa por parte también de nuestras autoridades.
Well, the European Union also considers water as a fundamental driver of green and circular growth, capable of guaranteeing job creation, especially in young people within a long-term perspective. We believe that watering in a circular economy resource efficiency can create new opportunities, open up for new business models and contribute to jobs creation, especially in young people.
We have two participants that have raised their hand. I want to give the floor to one. I think we're running behind time just there. So Lucy, can you go, please? Lucy, are you on? Can you go? Can you ask your question? Your hand is up.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, please, be quick.
Okay, thank you. I was just asking what are some of the strategies that you guys are using to make sure that people with multiple disabilities are not left behind in the quest for inclusive wash and food security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any panel member can address this quickly. if not, I would come in. There are two ways that the sector will try to address it. One is to be intentional about our interventions and make sure we target and make them inclusive and accessible as much as possible. The other option is to mainstream accessibility and inclusiveness in our programming, right from integrated water resource management all the way to governance. So that's mainly the two-pronged approach that is used to ensure this. Yes, there are challenges with regards to the actual implementation, but I think the direction is clear, and the sector as a whole is taking steps to ensure that that is addressed appropriately. So colleagues, thank you very much for this session. I just want to give a short summary of today's video and then the panel discussions. It's clear from the videos that water, it's linked to food security, health, education, and livelihood. That connection between the three, it's absolutely clear. And water is really life. We've also picked from the discussion that partnership, it's important to be able to address water and food security issues. One person or one agency can't do it all. We need to collaborate and draw on our comparative advantage to be able to address the current problems that face all of us. Second point, it's knowledge management and data generation. We need to build knowledge with the experiences and lessons that we've learned and apply them to identify new solutions that will help the most vulnerable in society. And in doing that, we should also ensure, as Claudia pointed out, that our interventions are integrated. And she clearly talked about multiple use of water, where we use water for food production and also for human consumption. And that is currently the way to go. The other option is to make sure that our interventions have high impact and are value driven. Paul talked about it in terms of how the EU prioritizes their interventions. So that is one key. Because of the limited resources that we have, we need to make sure we get value for money for where we put our resources. So thank you all for being part of this session. It's unfortunate that we have to close, but your participation clearly shows how important this topic is. And we look forward to taking this discussion beyond this session for us to be able to share and also implement interventions that will improve the lives of everybody in society. Thank you all on behalf of the convening team. I thank you all for participating, and also to the panel members, Joe, Christine, and Lucia. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Otra oportunidad.
Thank you. Please stop the video.